What's up, guys? Today I want to talk about what can easily be one of the most overwhelming areas of health to kind of look at, which is your nutrition or diet. With so much information being on the internet about what good foods are, what bad foods are, what times of day you should eat, what times of day you shouldn't eat, this, that, and every other which way we can spin it, it can become very confusing very quickly on what you should be doing. So my hope is today that I can kind of simplify things for you and at least get you started on the right path to really conquering your nutrition, which is super important for achieving your health and fitness goals. So let's start by talking about some of the big goal, or kind of the big goal for your nutrition, which should really be eating about 80% of your calorie intake from whole natural foods. Whole natural foods are things that you can find in nature, are very minimally processed, and if you look at the ingredients list, they have like 1 to 3 maybe ingredients total, and everything on there is something you kind of know to be a plant or animal essentially. Now, this is the big picture, so I don't expect you to get to this place right away. If you can, that's great, but I also want you to be realistic with what kind of changes you can make and what kind of changes you can sustain, as that's going to be what's crucial here. While maintaining the idea that our goal is to eat 80% or more of our food from whole natural sources, I think there's one step that a lot of people miss. That step's tracking your food. Now, I'm sure in the context of weight loss, everyone has heard the saying, eat less, move more, which really boils down to the base premise of calories in versus calories out, or the energy balance that we go through in day-to-day life. If we think about it as an energy balance, the food or things that we consume is energy coming into our body, and everything we do uses that energy as fuel. So if I eat less energy or consume less energy than I'm using, I tap into the stores of energy that I hold on my body in the forms of body fat or muscle. If I consume more energy than I'm using, I tend to start to store energy in my body in the form of body fat or muscle. Now, this is important to understand because you really have to look at it as a balance. And to understand how to weigh that balance out, you need to know what's going into your body and what kind of energy you're using. Now, it's a lot harder to track the energy outside of things. There are fitness trackers and watches and things that give you an estimate of the calories you burn. And while those tools are useful to get some data points, it's really tricky to track. However, we can pretty easily track the energy that we consume, and based on that and how our body responds, get an idea of the energy that we are using. This is why tracking becomes so important. If we look at it in a different way or kind of a different context, it's kind of like having a goal of saving $10,000. If I'm not tracking and I have no idea of how much money I am earning or spending, it's going to be really hard to accomplish the goal of $10,000 in savings. It can be done, but I'm kind of just shooting blindly. It's very similar with weight loss or weight gain. If I'm not keeping an eye on how much I'm consuming and what effects that has on my body or the amount of energy I'm using, it's going to be very difficult to effectively lose weight or gain weight depending on what your goal is. Now, there's really 2 ways that I recommend you track your food. The first method, which is the method I use and is generally going to be the fastest and most efficient way to achieve your goals, is actually weighing and tracking your food. This involves buying a food scale. You can find them on Amazon or in most stores, and actually weighing out your food and inputting that information into phone applications like MyFitnessPal or other similar diet tracking applications. This is going to put an exact number on what you're eating day to day and give you a really detailed insight into what changes you may need to make to accomplish your goals. The second method for tracking that a lot of people prefer is just portion control. Now, portion control is not going to be as exact as weighing and tracking, but it also doesn't require as much upfront work. So the method of portion control that I tend to like is actually from a different coach named Eugene Tao, and he calls it the Zimbabwe hand jive. I'll link his video in the description below, and I highly recommend you check it out if this is the method that you want to use. But in essence, what he recommends is that you base all your portions off your hand. And the way you do this is when you construct a meal, you have a palm size of protein, a fist of vegetables, a thumb of healthy fats, and a cupped hand of starches or carbs. Make sure you watch his video in the description below, as there's a little bit more to it than that, but he does a very good job of describing it, and I think you should show support to his video if you decide to use that method. Now, there is a little bit of nuance to how different nutrients like protein, carbohydrates, and fat affect our bodies, and also depending on what our goals and how our portion sizes or tracking should go. So just to briefly cover that, if you are weighing and tracking, we can get a little more exact. Now, with that, generally speaking, we want to aim for about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. If you have more than 20 pounds of body weight that you want to lose, I would either base that 1 gram of protein off your goal body weight or off your height in centimeters. Now, if you're weighing and tracking, carbohydrates and fats are generally going to kind of sort themselves out a little bit based on your calories and protein. That being said, it is important for you to recognize that if your goal is weight loss, your calories need to be less than the energy that you are expending. So you should be seeing over week to week, your average weight starts to come down. If that is not the case, then you need to reduce your calories. Now, I do not recommend reducing your calories via protein. That should kind of always stay the same, so those numbers are going to come down from your carbohydrates and fat. If you're trying to gain weight or gain muscle, the same concept applies with the protein. We want to stay right at about that 1 pound or 1 gram of protein to 1 per pound of body weight. And then the calories just need to be slightly higher than the energy that we're using. We want to see slow weight gain over time on a week-to-week basis. And if you aren't, you need to make increases to your food. Now, this can be through protein, carbs, or fat, but we want to make sure we're at least getting that amount of protein. Now, the same concepts apply to the hand portion method. So I always want to prioritize protein, and if anything, even going a little bit above the palm size of protein. And then depending on what my goal is, if I'm trying to lose weight, I may need to reduce the amount of meals that I eat, or I can kind of take away from the cup size of carbohydrates. It's probably the easiest place to remove from. And if I'm trying to gain weight, again, we can add a little bit more onto the protein, or we can add into a little bit more of the thumb size of fat or cup size of carbohydrates. In the description, I'll leave a lot of this advice kind of in a written format so that you have a reference guide. But just know that protein is going to be a high priority, because this is really going to dictate on whether you build muscle while you're gaining weight or lose body fat instead of muscle while you're losing weight. The idea is not that you have to track forever, but you track long enough that you really start to understand what that energy balance looks like for you and the foods that you generally tend to eat. It's a great educational tool, and while it does involve a little bit of work, it will help you get to your goals much more quickly than just guessing at if I'm eating enough or not enough, if I'm moving enough, or all those things. It removes a lot of the guesswork from the equation of your health and fitness goals. Once you've kind of decided what the best form of tracking is for you, you're well on your way. Now it's just about taking small steps to the big picture of tracking your food and eating 80% of your calories from whole natural foods. Now, there's many different steps on this journey you can take. Some people can jump right into it, start tracking all their food and be right on whole natural foods and be fine with that. Some people, that's just not going to match their lifestyle, and they're not willing to jump over to it so quickly. So while in the description I'll leave some recommendations on steps you can take, it's really important that you take ownership and responsibility of this process and kind of reflect on what steps might look like for you in the long term to get to those big pictures. Again, if you have any comments, questions, or any thoughts about this video, please feel free to comment below. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.